All right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Thank you for your patience. Today is Tuesday, March 15th. I hereby call the committee into order. I guess I did that with the gavel already. Before we get started, do we have any personal orders from anybody in the committee here? I see none. Madam Secretary, please take the roll.
Representatives Vaughn. Here. Cochran. Here. Darby. Here. Gillespie. Here. Hakeem. Here. Parkinson. Chairman White. Here. Chairman Lafferty.
Here.
Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you for that. Let's see. And I've already asked for personal orders. We got that out of the way. We got several bills on the calendar, on the regular calendar today. Let's go ahead and get started to that. First up, item number one, that'd be 2739 by Lafferty. I'm going to roll that one to the hill. Next up, we've got Chair Lady Moody, House Bill 0650. We have motion and second. Chair Lady, you are recognized.
Thank you so much for that, members. There is an amendment, code 014369.
Yes. We have motion and second. Please proceed.
All right. With this drafting code, it will rewrite the bill to provide that Tennessee Higher Education Commission follow any policy that the State Building Commission sets concerning capital projects impacting Tennessee institutions of higher education. And I can go on if there's, Secretary of State brought this to me, and I can read some more if you need more explanation or questions.
It seems straightforward. Chairman White, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. And that was my question. This is brought to us by the Secretary of State.
Correct.
This is not a cleanup bill. It's just a bill to
Bring everything together.
Okay.
This one little sentence may help. Every capital project impacting a THAC must come before the State Building Commission for consideration, so it was appropriate that the State Building Commission provide parameters that THAC will use when bringing such projects before the State Building Commission.
You're recognized.
And THEC is good with it also, right?
It says they have deferred.
Okay.
All right, any other questions, committee? Seeing none. All those in favor of the amendment, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the ayes have it on the amendment. The amendment's on the bill. Any further explanation for the bill? Any further questions on the bill?
I'm good.
Okay, seeing none. We'll be voting on House Bill 0650. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the ayes have it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're off to Education Full. All right, next up, we've got Chairman Vaughn, House Bill 2249. And it looks like we've got a few amendments here. Have these, excuse me one second. And Chairman Vaughn, which amendments are you looking to add onto this?
015661.
All right, could I get a motion on the bill? Or I'm sorry, on the amendment? In a second. We have a motion and a second. You're recognized for explanation.
Thank you, sir. This committee was looked favorably last year on our efforts to bring the name, image, and likeness legislation before you in dealing with compensation for student athletes, and it has proven to be a very useful tool for our universities. It has been of benefit to our collegiate athletes, and so we're coming back asking for a few tweaks to it. Of things, as we go along, there's things you learn. Number one is, in some cases, you've seen states roll back in general, and that then says, hey, we're just going to let the NCAA guide us without any legislative oversight. We don't think that's the appropriate thing to do. We like the guardrails we have in place dealing with so that we can ensure that our universities' brands are protected against things like endorsements for products and activities that we would not be conducive with. So we still believe in our NIL bill. We're just offering a few amendments to it, a few tweaks to it that's actually going to make it better for our athletes and their families. The first item that this amendment deals with is group licensing. And group licensing would provide an opportunity for the members of our different teams to frankly appear on video games. That was one of the things that some of the court challenges that occurred over this was it was really good for the athletes, but it really impacted the video game market. And so this would allow for members of a team to sign up on a group licensing deal so that Tennessee or Memphis State could be on the NCAA 2022 game. Because I can tell you there's a big void in the world of video gamers of not being able to play college football. And we want to try to get that taken care of. The next thing is that we are going to be working for our program had a little bit of a conflict between our agent law, our sports agent law, and our NIL law. So what this does is this clarifies the fact that family members do not have to be registered as sports agents. If a parent of a very good playing basketball player, very talented, was to answer a phone call with regards to whether or not his daughter could appear at an event or a camp, that activity does not involve agency. And so we clarify that. And then, let's see, we've got one other in here. Remember, we're still not directly compensating athletes. And then finally, the last is a caveat in here, a little note that prohibits athletic associations from impacting NIL compensation for athletes for activities that occurred before they got there unless they're actively named and committing a violation. So what we're doing is we're protecting this year's athletes versus a decade ago's sanctions.
Sorry, could you repeat that last part for me, please?
Yes, sir. The bill prohibits athletic associations from interfering in NIL activity protected under the statute and impacting athletes' eligibility or full participation unless those students have been proven to commit a violation of either the institution's rules or the association's rules.
If I could sum that up, it sounds like, tell me if I'm wrong, the past transgressions of a university are not going to affect a kid that's just come onto campus if there's penalties or sanctions.
That is the intent, sir.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay.
And with that, I'm here to answer any questions and appreciate y'all looking favorably upon this bill.
Members, anyone have any questions? I've got one other besides the one that I jumped in before your
Sure.
conclusion, my bad. With things like these video games, are there going to be royalties negotiations, things like that, with these games going out over and over again? Would that be something that would perhaps creep its way back into this, or it's just curiosity?
Well, it would be my understanding that each year I would assume that since the rosters change, that each year would have its own set licensing agreement, and whatever's negotiated with that licensing agreement would apply for those athletes whose name, image, or likeness is included in that video game.
Okay. All right. We may be back for more fun next year. Anybody else have a question? Chairman White, you're recognized.
No question, mainly just thank you for taking this on. This has been kind of a complex process we've dealt with for a couple of years and just trying to keep up with it, so I appreciate you just continuing on to work with that, with all the things. But I do have one question. Does this include former cheerleaders of years past?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I can tell you with firsthand knowledge and assuredness that they are underappreciated. And that may be a bill. I may have to bring a House resolution just thanking cheerleaders and mascots for their service towards their universities and towards this state, and keeping the spirit elevated throughout our system. So I feel a little bit, I'm glad you brought attention to that and allow me this opportunity to support shout out to all the cheerleaders and mascots who've been overlooked throughout the annals of time.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that. Any other questions? Seeing none, looks like we are ready to vote on the amendment. All those in favor of Amendment 15661, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Amendment's on the bill. Any further comment from the sponsor?
No, sir.
Any further questions from the committee? We are voting on House Bill 2249. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
You're on your way to Education full. We're going to skip around a little bit since we seem to be missing some players in today's game. That's NIL fun. Item number 7, House Bill 2016 by Chairman Hawk is, there he is. And let's see, I don't see an amendment on here. Chairman Hawk, I'm looking for a motion and a second. Motion. We have a motion and a second. Chairman Hawk, you're recognized on 2016.
Thank you, Chairman and members. And I know bills of this nature come before this committee quite often, and I don't have any preconceived notion of where it's about to go, so I understand completely. What we're trying to do is our nurses in our school districts and our school systems have been under a lot of stress here lately. We've got some legislation that would increase pay. We're trying to get them into the BEP formula in a more robust way as we fund nurses in our schools. So what we're looking at is trying to create a piece of legislation that would bring nurses in our school districts, our local LEAs, into the same posture as teachers in terms of giving them a higher ed tuition discount to our state universities for them as an employee. I understand there's a fiscal note to it. Philosophically, there may be some challenges. So I'm going to take the lead from the committee, and if the committee would like to vote moving on forward, I'd love to see that. Otherwise, I'm going to take it off notice. So I'll take a nod from the committee, whichever direction. I do want just folks to know that this is an important issue across the state, that our nurses are need to be thanked any way that they possibly can.
Understood. Any questions? That's fine. Chairman White, you're recognized.
No, I just wanted to say, Leader Hawk, thank you, and I understand what you're doing and everything, but as we say often, this is where the lottery calendar originates. There's so many good causes out there, but someone does have to eventually eat the cost. So appreciate you, but thank you for taking it off notice.
Representative Cochran, you're recognized.
And I was just going to mention something similar. I wonder if we might have a better idea kind of what we would be dealing with after, assuming maybe that new funding formula goes into place. I know it kind of funds some school nursing positions. We might know that universe a little bit more, what universe of school nurses we would actually be looking at if that ends up maybe expanding how many school nurses we have, and kind of gives us a better idea of how many we would be funding. But like I say, I think it's a worthy thing also. I wonder if we maybe should see how this new funding formula, if it were to go into effect, how that affects that overall universe of school nurses.
You're recognized.
And thank you, Chairman Cochran. To your point, we're funding now one nurse for every 3,000 students. We're very hopeful that as we work on the TISA plan, that the funding program will look more like one nurse for every 750 students, which gets them more toward that fully funded by state dollars as opposed to being supplemented by local dollars, which is occurring now with many instances. And I'll use one of my school systems that I represent. There are 7 school buildings, but only funding for one nurse in the state plan. So if we get that closer to being state dollars that are paying those nurses' salaries, we may certainly get to where there is an opportunity to bring them into the fold in this program as well. So I'm certainly willing to ask or answer any more questions that you've got, but as I'll follow the chairman of the full committee's lead, I'm pending any other questions or comments. I'll be happy to take the bill off notice, Chairman and members.
Any other questions? Seeing none, House Bill 2016 is off notice. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We'll move back up the calendar to item number 4, House Bill 2729 by Representative Ogles. So I'm walking, there he is. Looks like you may have an amendment, sir.
Thank you, Chairman, members of committee.
Oh, need a motion and a second, please. All right, we're in the proper posture now, and that amendment number that I have is Amendment 014574.
Yes, Chairman, that's correct.
Okay. Need a motion and a second? And second? All right. Let's go ahead and put the amendment on the bill. All those in favor of adding the amendment to the bill indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? The aye had it. All right, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chairman, and members of the committee. This piece of legislation would direct TASSER to do a study of communications on college campuses, specifically those relevant to reporting of crime. Chairman Curcio's office was so kind to use some of the interns to do a report to me in a spreadsheet that I sent to all of y'all. Right now, we have somewhat of a discombobulated system where on some of our universities, students are directed to call 911, which is a system that's kind of very well done. There's those calls are recorded. There's a capacity to retrieve those, discovery. Some of the institutions may or may not, and this is in no way making allegations of anything inappropriate or wrongdoing, but when looking at some of the direction of who to call, there may be instances that could arise where someone would call a number and that communication would not specifically be retrievable. For instance, call an online security officer to report a crime, then you have the discovery and have to do testimony and call them before to say, hey, what exactly was said, what was reported, and it may cause troubles in hindsight to recreate certain incidences, especially with reporting of on-campus crime. This would just enable TASSER to study this, give us some policies and procedures, and look at that practice statewide and give some suggestions of where, if any, there might be some deficiencies or areas that we may be able to improve looking at this going forward. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that explanation. Representative Gillespie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Ogles, I just wanted to make sure, so what we're doing here is we're asking TASSER to study maybe the implementation of a campus-only emergency number, or what are we?
No, sir, not specifically. And my dealings with TASSER in the past was, once they see the General Assembly has an interest in something, that they usually reach out to the sponsors and members of the committee to say, well, specifically, what would you like us to look at? I'm more concerned with, for instance, if you have a student, a sibling, a daughter that goes to UT, when something bad happens, what happens at UT, I think, in a lot of ways, should be very similar to another school across the state. And we shouldn't necessarily have private institutions that may have a different policy and procedure for reporting crimes than our state institutions are held at. So this would, in many ways, level, I hate to say level the field, but this would just kind of put us on the best practices across the board and let TASSER look at that with input, hopefully from our chairman of our various committees to look at that. I just want to be sure that nothing's falling through the cracks, especially and related to college campus crime. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that. Chairman White, you're recognized.
Are we requiring or requesting our college campuses to do anything other than cooperate with the TASSER study?
You're recognized.
No, sir. That's not part of the this. This is simply just asking TASSER to take a look at this, and they've been a great resource in the past. Just to be sure that we're taking full advantage and doing all we can to promote good practices.
Thank you.
Representative Gillespie, did you have another question? Okay. Anyone else? Try to clarify something you said early on for me. The mention of different numbers. I would hope kids, by the time they're in college, if there's a serious enough emergency, they know to call 911. But it seemed that there are other numbers on campus, campus security you mentioned, that people may call without recognizing that they should have called 911? Is that what I heard?
Yes, Chairman, and not to get into the weeds too much, but, and it may be just a simple oversight, but some of the information that's published online, in fact, is directing students to call other numbers. So there, and that's part of my fear is there may be an instance that where a student should call 911 and they in fact call another number, and then we've started something that's very hard to work back from.
Okay. So right now, if someone is discerning enough, if it's not an emergency, I mean, we've got 411 in Knox County. I don't know if that's statewide, but if you need information about something, you can call 411. I'm guessing that the students, somebody stole their bicycle off the bike rack. Do you need to call the city police or do you call campus security?
To the chairman's point, we've muddied the water, even with some of the, I would say, some of the initiatives we've done with diverting people away from 911. The water has been muddied on what's emergency and where urgency is. For instance, there's a lot of crimes where the person's not directly in harm's way, but gathering of evidence, preserving evidence, being sure things are done in a timely fashion, and that person is routed to the appropriate people is very time sensitive. So it may not be a direct emergency, but there is urgency. So how do we, and that's part of what I hope TASER will study and help us differentiate, is where do we draw that line and what should be directed. And when those resources are put out to those oncoming freshmen and those universities publish information online, what is said, and because the words are important. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. And so I assume that the original idea with these extra emergency numbers or extra contact opportunities was to limit the amount of stress and strain already put on a 911 system. Okay, but all you're looking to do here today is to dig into this a little deeper. Let's see if there are confusions being created, if they need to be addressed. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman.
With that, if there's no more questions, members, are we ready to vote? All those in favor of passing House Bill 2729, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. You're on to education full.
Thank you, Chairman.
Looks like you're next on our calendar, too. House Bill 2730. Can I get a motion? I have a motion and a second. Looks like you've got some amendments to be added here as well. Do you have one amendment number specifically you're looking to use?
Chairman, would you read that off to me, if you don't mind? There's two amendments. The shorter of the two is the one that needs to go on.
Okay, that's 014131.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Need a motion and a second on the amendment? All right, we have that. All those in favor of adding the amendment to the bill indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Amendment is now on the bill. Representative Ogles, you are recognized for an explanation.
Thank you, Chairman, members of your committee. This bill addresses the annual report of the crime on college campuses, and what this amendment does is simply says that the comptroller is able to audit that information, and when that report is generated, we'll have a person from the school whose name is issued with that part of that report. Right now, this report's generated. If there's any indiscrepancies or questions we may have, there's really no capacity to go back and look at information that's provided in that report. This will just enable the comptroller to go back and do an audit if any indiscrepancies are seen, or if we have any questions, or if there's any further issues that need to be resolved.
Thank you for that. Members, do we have a question? Chairman White.
Thank you, Chairman. Now, this one requires the comptroller, the treasurer. Are they good with this? Have you talked to them about their ability to perform this function?
Thank you, Chairman. I didn't specifically, I met with them twice just to ask questions of the process. Specifically, one of their investigators, because I had questions about some of the numbers that were reported during this report, and they specifically didn't say that we want to do this, but the indication that I had is if it's the will of the General Assembly, that I believe they have the capacity to do that.
Follow up?
So it says the bill would require, the amendment would require the higher education institutions to report the crime statistics, but the comptroller may conduct a review, may or may not. Okay. May I ask you this? These particular bills, and I appreciate you bringing them forth because crime on campus is important. Are these your ideas, or were these brought to you by any group?
Please.
Thank you, Chairman. Sitting on criminal previous years and then being a member of judiciary, the crime on campus is something that's kind of caught my attention. Some of the national statistics say as many as 1 in 5 young females on campus will be sexually assaulted before they leave. So that's some of these numbers nationally kind of draw attention to, this indeed may be a crisis. When looking at seeing how Tennessee is performing, I noticed some of our institutions reported numbers that kind of follow a national trend. Some of the state averages, something you would unfortunately expect to see, while other institutions, for whatever various reasons, tend to have almost no crime where it seems to not be in existence. And there is federal statute in place under the Clery Act that in fact says if they give financial aid that they are not, that they are compelled to report. So I just want to be sure that the same standards that some of our great institutions are doing, specifically University of Tennessee, as well as several other private institutions as well, seem to be doing a very, very good job at reporting the crime. There seems to be some anomalies in the data that may be problematic, and I would simply like a capacity for the comptroller, if these patterns seem to continue, where we have organizations that seem to, for whatever reason, have no crime. That's suspect, to say the least.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Representative Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Lafferty. Your bill would require an individual's name to be on the report, but isn't it the report of the university or the college? It's not the individual's personal report, it's the university's report, isn't it?
You're recognized.
Yes, but just like on this report, Director Roush's name is on it, including for the TVI, and he's the ranking official that takes accountability to say this is something that my department has looked at. We've compiled this information for you as General Assembly. I would like those organizations that submit that information to TBI to have an individual's name that's linked to that, so there's some level of accountability. If nothing else, when the comptroller goes to perform an audit, if they may seem fit, that we have someone to link that information to, someone whose desk it went through, somebody's, so we don't create there's just checks and balances is all I can say.
Would these reports be public, matter of public record? Anybody could see them if they did the appropriate search?
Yes, and these numbers are federally required to be public. In fact, they are part of the Clery Act, and the fact that they are not. It's not permissive. It's required if those institutions, in fact, give financial aid and federal monies are given, or they're eligible for federal financial aid.
Last question then. Would you have any concern that this individual's name on the report would then be public and this individual at the college or university would then be associated with the report as if it were somehow that person's work as an individual instead of on behalf of the university? Seems like that individual's name will become public, associated with the report, when really it's the report of the university. Maybe it should be the university president or chancellor whose name's on the report. And then if there's a problem, that person finds who on their staff was responsible for which piece of the report. I guess my question is, do you have a concern about an individual's name being publicly associated with the report?
I would think that there, that because of this report, there's a importance. I would assume that it would be a chancellor, or it would be a president, or it would be one of the more high-ranking individuals within that organization, in which their name is already publicly associated with almost anything that happens at that university. So to say that by removing a name from a report somehow insulates them from scrutiny, or I think I hadn't thought that would be problematic.
Sorry, one more. So maybe that means it would be satisfactory under your bill to just have the university president's name on there. For UT's report, it could be President Randy Boyd. Leave it at that.
I'm at the will of the committee. I would love that if you would like to make that amendment.
Not wanting to amend anything, just wondering
Right.
what your bill would require, if that would satisfy the requirements of your bill.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm open to any suggestions if a caveat needs to be made specifically to the wording of whose name goes on the report. I'm open to that, and I've yet to have any pushback or anybody air any concerns, but I'm definitely open to the will of the committee.
Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you. And I would agree with Representative Baum on that if it's the will of the committee, whether or not a verbal amendment here, but if it moves out to full committee, I would like to see us make that change with an amendment.
Thank you, Chairman. The only concern I have with that is not every institution of higher education has a president. I think you have some chancellors and some of the.
True.
I hate to look. I don't know that everybody has a president per se.
Please.
No, you're absolutely right. UT has President Randy Boyd, but they have, 5 or 6 chancellors now over each one. So anyway, if it be the will of the committee, I think whatever the verbiage would be, that's not a bad idea, what Representative Vaughn suggested.
Any other questions? Kind of along those lines, if I'm putting my name on something, I want to look over it. We're creating extra work for somebody. I know somebody with those big titles would have people to do that kind of work for them. So however, we need to figure out the verbiage for that to work, please.
Well, thank you, Chairman. And if you look, and I don't want to read off the full list, but in recent years we've had many universities that have been given very, very hefty federal fines for discrepancies with some of this reporting. So to me, this is just more than anything, this is we have a fiduciary duty to be sure these crimes are reported properly. And I'd hate to be in the posture of so many states who recently have received very, very large fines to the tune of multi-million dollars, 4.5, 2.2, 1.8, just are numbers that I'm recalling that in the last couple of years have been levied on state institutions and universities for not reporting properly. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none. Looks like we're ready to vote on House Bill 2730. All those in favor of passing House Bill 2730 indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. You're on education full.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee.
Thank you. Next on our calendar, we have item number 6, House Bill 1862 by Representative Sexton. Good day, sir. Can I get a motion and a second? We have a motion and a second. Looks like you have an amendment on today's bill. Is that correct?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. The amendment is 15059, and it makes the bill.
That is what we have here. Members, we need to go ahead and add the amendment. Could I get a motion and a second on adding the amendment? Or we already covered that? My apologies. All those in favor? Oh, my apologies again. I do need that motion and second on the amendment. Can I get a motion? Motion and second? You have second. Let's see. So Amendment 1 is on the bill. Representative Sexton, if you would please go ahead and tell us what you're up to.
Well, what I'm up to is some of the colleges and higher institutions have announced that they're no longer going to require the ACT or the SAT testing. And so what this bill does is it bypasses this year. It really doesn't start till 2023 and 2024, so we don't have to back up, but it does two things. It defines what a freshman is, but that all incoming freshmen would have to submit the ACT, the SAT, or some other acceptable scoring when they enter into college. It would prohibit any freshman going to college without submitting this. It creates the exception for students that have disabilities, developmental disabilities, those type of things. So it does excuse those. That's basically all it does. It's just trying to put that back in place, what we've had in place for years.
Thank you for that explanation. So it doesn't require the schools then to use that ACT or SAT score as an admissions piece, but it does require it to be in the folder, if you will.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you for that. Members, do we have any questions? Chairman White?
So it's currently an option, right? Whether or not the university uses the ACT or not.
It's my understanding, Representative,
ready.
it's my understanding that during all this COVID, it started changing. I could be mistaken on that, but that was my understanding, and they decided to just continue to not have this testing and admit them anyway. I think we really need some kind of testing. I think there needs to be something, scoring them as they go into college, and that's just my feelings. So
Sure.
I hope that answers your question.
Follow up?
Mr. Chairman, has anybody from higher education asked to speak on this bill?
Yes. 2 people.
With the permission of the committee, I would like to ask for a recess to hear from them.
Without objection, we're out of session. Let's see. Looks like we may have a substitute for Mr. Warren. And there's Mr. Warren. If you all would please, for the record, indicate who you are, where you're from.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Can you hear me okay? Carrie Whitworth with the University of Tennessee System. Appreciate the opportunity to just provide a couple of comments and some context around the issue. We do have concerns with the legislation as it seeks to codify, for the first time in state history, requirements on students for admissions to our state public universities. There are many public universities in the state of Tennessee. All of us are different. We serve different populations, and we face different market forces. At UT, our goal is to remain nimble and competitive in light of those market forces, and having a statutory mandate on admissions criteria does not help us meet that objective. A little bit of context on where we are as a system. 3 of our undergraduate campuses, UT Knoxville, UT Martin, and UT Chattanooga, are currently engaged in test-optional pilot programs. While for UT, these pilots were born out of the pandemic due to testing access issues, that may not be the case for other universities in the state who have had longer-standing test-optional policies. Where are we nationwide? Well, presently, over 70% of colleges across the country are test optional. We are unsure what will happen with that trend as the country comes out of COVID, and our Board of Trustees is currently assessing that as a factor of marketplace competitiveness, right? How do the trends play into that in keeping UT competitive? I will also note we still utilize test scores. We use them for admission, scholarships, and course placement when they are provided by an applicant. We will have a full year's data on how this test optional pilot programs have gone in June, and how these students are doing on our campuses. And so we would respectfully ask that that data be considered prior to making a decision on the bill before you today. I'd just like to highlight one additional policy issue for the committee's consideration. While some exceptions have been addressed in the amendment, there's still no exception should testing access become an issue, as it did during the pandemic or during cases of natural disaster or other extenuating circumstances that the state has faced in the past. So, we would be boxed in that scenario. As such, I guess we just respectfully request that the body provide us enough latitude to continue considering the competitive landscape around enrollment that we find ourselves in as an institution.
Thank you for that. Representative Cochran, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate you, Kerry, coming to speak to this. And I think UT makes a lot of valid points, and I think overall, I think I'm with you. I think you need to have that ability to be nimble. But the only thing I would want to add, and just for the record, I want to make sure that regardless of what admissions mechanisms we use, that it's always based on excellence. I don't ever want, I would never want to see UT or any other university or institution, state-funded institution, say, well, we're not going to use the ACT anymore because we feel like it's going to hurt people's feelings, or whatever, because this demand for excellence is whatever, in some sort of response to wokeism or whatever we want to call it. And so that's ultimately what I agree with giving you that nimbleness, and I think I'm with you. I just wanted to say it for the record that regardless of what mechanisms we're using to admit those students, I think I would probably speak for them, for many of us, in saying that it needs to always be based on excellence and making sure that we're admitting students who are ready for that college experience and who are going to make productive citizens.
And we agree with you, if I may, Chairman, Representative Cochran. We are funded in Tennessee based on performance in higher education, and so we have no incentive to admit students we don't believe will be academically successful on our campuses.
Chairman White.
Thank you. And help me to understand also, now let's take Tennessee. Now, we got legislation, I don't think it's gone through the floor yet, where the administration, we're going to increase the Hope scholarships to 5,100, it appears. And that is based upon, for a student to get a Hope scholarship, based upon GPA or an ACT, of 21. So how does that affect a university like UT, where you got to look at that ACT of 21, because you definitely want the student to have the Hope scholarship, right? So how would that affect?
We do, but that's UT itself is not awarding the Hope scholarship, and it's also an or, right? It's a GPA or a Hope or a ACT score. And
so you wouldn't necessarily want to look at the ACT. You could just go with the GPA. Is that what I'm saying?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. Members, do we have any other questions for our guest? Seeing none. All right, we'll gavel back. Thank you. Oh, it's been brought to my attention. Sorry, Representative. Just one moment. I believe Lou Hinman may want to speak for just a moment. No, I'm sorry. Before you get too comfortable. All right, we're going to gavel back into session then. Let me ask one more round the room. Is there a Ryan Smith in the house by chance? Brian Smith. Okay. Seeing no one. All right. We are back in session. You're recognized, sir, for any follow-up.
Yes, I'd just like to make a few comments. It concerns me when we use terms like competitive environment. We have to remember that in the world of education, especially in college, that these students are their customers. And each university wants to get as many students as they can because that's how that they make their money. It's where they get their money from. And if we think it's not about money, then I think we're badly fooled. I'm afraid that we're dumbing down our education system and not considering what's going on as far as testing, where these children are. It's about how many heads that they can get in and how many that they can get out the door. And it's requires a lot of money. And these institutions, I'm a Vol for life. Go Vols. I love Tennessee, the University of Tennessee. But I think some of our policies are not geared toward the students. They're geared toward the school. And I think a lot of our education goes that way. We need to get back to what's best for the student, not what's best for the institution itself. Although the institution is what we rely on, but we have to hold them accountable for what they're doing. How that we can do that by making testing easier. I wish they had some of these policies when I was in school because I had to cheat to get, I really did. If they would put on their test score, I don't know the answer, I'd put I don't know either. So, no, I'm just kidding. Part of it I'm kidding about. Part of it I'm not. But you guys know more about education than I do. I'm not going to claim that I know more than Mark White about education. I don't. And I know that his heart and his best interest is in our education system. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So God bless you with whatever you do.
Thank you for that. When Representative Cochran was asking questions earlier, the word meritocracy went through my mind. That's based on people's merit. Let's get the best and the brightest where they need to be and do what we can to help them out.
Yes.
Do we have any other questions? Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Chairman Lafferty. I guess I was just going to say that I feel inclined to give our colleges and universities a year to study the data and come to the conclusion on their own for whether they want to require these tests or not. I guess in that sense, I feel like this bill is about a 1 year premature. But having said that, I actually agree with you. I hope that these colleges and universities will come to the conclusion that ACT and SAT or similar tests are not only important to consider, but should be required. I'll give you an example of why I say that. In Murfreesboro, in the newspaper, they print in late spring the pictures of all the valedictorians at different high schools. And there's a magnet school in Murfreesboro that has about 40 valedictorians with a 4.0. With that kind of grade inflation, I don't know how a university would take an application with GPAs and figure out who to admit and who not to admit. But an ACT score will help differentiate which ones of those students are more meritorious than others. So I think you found the right conclusion, and I agree with you, but I'm willing to give these colleges and universities a year to come to that conclusion on their own.
And I can appreciate that. Yeah, very well.
Members, any other questions? Very well said. I'd like to echo your sentiments if I could. With that, are we ready to vote? Roll it.
Yeah, I can roll it, take it off notice, postpone it. I understand the position of the committee, and I think Chairman Vaughn said it best.
With the questions that are out there, with the potential information coming down the pipe, why don't we go ahead and roll this And Chairman White, I was going to say, why don't we go ahead and roll this and maybe just kind of sit back and wait and see what the data tells us. If there's no objections. Oh, I'm sorry.
Take it off notice.
Take it off notice then. Okay, without objection?
Yes.
All right, we'll go ahead and take it off notice.
Thank you, committee.
Thank you. Next up, we're going to jump to item number 8 by Representative Farmer. It's House Bill 2436. And I see Chairman Farmer.
Thank you, members. And I believe I have an amendment on this. It's 15658. Is that right?
Need a motion and a second on the bill. All right, we've got a motion and a second. And a motion and a second on the amendment. All right, a motion and a second.
And it makes the bill.
Okay, is that amendment number 015658?
It is.
All right. You are, let's see, members, let's go ahead and vote on adding the amendment. All those in favor of adding amendment 15658 indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? And the ayes have it. Amendment is on the bill. You're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. It's an honor to be in here in front of the Education Subcommittee today. Members, what this bill does is currently, with regards to the HOPE Scholarship, once a student completes high school, they can go on and enroll in college and be a part of that scholarship process, right? But there's no mechanism for a student that finishes early. Say they finish their junior year, there's no mechanism for them to go ahead and take advantage of that scholarship and move on to postgraduate work or graduate work, I guess I should say. So what this bill does is gives them the mechanism, provides that mechanism to do so. So they can go on and go to school, and maybe the parents don't have to take out a loan to pay for that year of education. They go ahead and take care of our scholarship money, take advantage of our scholarship monies, and not have to sit out a year potentially and get sidetracked and forget they want to get an education. So that's what this bill does.
Thank you for that explanation. Members, do we have any questions on the bill? Chairman White?
Thank you, Chairman. Since it mentions Tennessee Promise, has anyone asked to speak on this bill, just so we can get full knowledge? They have?
We can go ahead and go out of session for just a second and
Okay,
speak to Lou Henneman about this.
just make sure we have enough information.
Okay. We are out of session.
Good afternoon, Lou Hanneman with the Tennessee Higher Education Commission, Tennessee Student Assistance Corporation.
You're recognized, Chairman.
Just wanted to get another opinion on this. These bills coming for us fast and furious right now in subcommittee. Just want to make sure we had all the information.
Sure. So this legislation basically puts Tennessee Promise students, as I understand it, into a similar posture to Hope Scholarship students. The only question we would raise is that from a mechanical standpoint, from a structural standpoint, Tennessee Promise has a number of sequential requirements that a student has to comply with. And so for us to implement this, and the fiscal note I think is somewhere around $45,000 or $50,000. For us to implement this, we would basically just start requiring, those students who were interested in graduating high school early or taking advantage of this, they would need to apply the previous November, so in their junior year, in order to then take advantage. We would do that through rule, obviously, because it's not laid out here in the statute. So we're deferred, but just want you to know that the context around how we would implement that is a little different from the way we handle it for students graduating in a traditional pathway.
So the way when they graduate traditionally, they had to do the FAFSA by a certain month, then they had to have a mentor.
It's a very explicit process, and so by November 1st, during your senior year, you have to apply for Tennessee Promise, and then by March 1st, you have to have completed your FAFSA, and of course, somewhere in there, you have met with our partnering organizations, Tennessee Achieves or the Heirs Foundation, for a mandatory meeting around college knowledge. And then at some point, you're connected with a mentor. And then, of course, that connectivity remains pretty consistent throughout the remainder of your high school, career. And then you graduate, and you're committed at that point. You've applied for a college, and so you know where you're going. When a student graduates in December, they're basically, 4 months ahead of the curve of that current process. And so in order to maintain all of those requirements that are part of Tennessee Promise that are not a part of the Hope Scholarship, we would simply move that back a year. So if there was an enterprising student who knew they were going to graduate early because they were kind of aggressive in meeting their requirements, they could plan ahead also and then apply for Tennessee Promise. That's how we would interpret the steps necessary to implement.
You recognize?
So it would be possible under this framework to do that, right?
It's not, well, part of this is it's not laid out necessarily in the language, but to arrive at the effect of that language, in order to even provide that option for an early graduating person to take advantage of Promise because of those other requirements that are not part of what, when you graduate with Hope Scholarship, you're eligible because of your GPA or your ACT. And so when you enroll is not really, a question because the requirements are met. For Tennessee Promise, our requirements, because there's no GPA, is meeting requirements by commitment. You apply by a certain date, you complete a FAFSA, you complete community service, and so all of these things are bound to a time frame. In order to accommodate this change, we simply move that time frame back a year for those students. But the burden would be on the students to recognize that they were on that pathway.
Okay, one last.
Please.
So, yeah, I'm just concerned, we had another bill where, a student could stay out for a year, which kind of destroys the effectiveness of what Tennessee Promise was set up for. So I just want to be careful what road we're going down, because Tennessee Promise is a particular tool.
I think that's a fair assessment. I think that, just like many other ideas are, all worth consideration. I don't know that we've fully explored this because it isn't really necessarily part of, the Promise intent as we originally conceived it, but certainly happy to, continue looking at that if necessary.
Any follow-up? Representative Keem, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first question I'll ask you is that what we're talking about now is doable. Is that correct?
We can implement it, yes, sir. There would be some, I think increased burden on a student's awareness of where they are. Otherwise, a student would find themselves graduating in December, not having applied in a timely way to even be eligible for the provisions of this.
I'm asking if THEC can lighten that burden on such a student by, just as you have in place for persons who are seniors, you can have something in place for persons who are juniors, knowing what, if the school administration knows what needs to be done, that would assist that young person. But I mean, it shouldn't be the child is on their own, so to speak.
Please.
No, I completely agree, and I don't mean to misspeak here. The structural components of how we would implement it, the student would be bound to those. Our outreach and guidance to the LEAs would certainly provide the information they need to know that if there are students in their pipeline, and it would be really more a relationship between the guidance counselors at the high school who should know who these students are, and then the student. They already know what the infrastructure is around Tennessee Promise. That process has been in place for a number of years now. And so, again, this is kind of new territory for us. We begin outreach to, really in some cases, 8th graders about Tennessee Promise. And so there should not be a lack of knowledge. But if a student is planning to graduate a semester early, then they need to start having those conversations about Tennessee Promise a year earlier. I don't know that we would know who those students are.
One last question.
Yes, sir.
Going back to my original question. It is doable. Is that correct?
I think mechanically it is doable.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? I've got just a little tidbit. We're probably not talking about a very big population. Remember back to my high school days, there were very few people, if any, that I knew circles you run in, right? That I knew that got through high school quickly. So we're probably not talking about a big population, and those folks are probably going to be pretty well aware. They've made up their minds. They're on a track. They're going to know their options.
Well, if I may, I think that there's really two populations of students we're talking about. And so just in kind of talks with some of our K-12 partners and our Gear Up organization, who's very much embedded in these schools, it really is two populations of students that graduate early. You have students that the LEA may recognize as not likely to graduate if they require that final semester. And so having met technically all of the requirements for graduation, they kind of expedite that process. Then I think, and I think this is more towards the sponsor's intent, you have students who have aggressively gotten ahead of the curve and have met those requirements and then some, and are now looking to, kind of move right on into a post-secondary environment. So two groups of students, both captured, I think, within this same language. And so the Tennessee Promise doesn't parse along whether you're an accelerated student or a student being expedited out of the LEA. I think that answered your question.
Thank you. It did. Any other questions? Seeing none. Let's go back into session. We're here. Chairman Farmer, any conclusions?
Yeah, members, I just want to say this. Look, this is encouraging children and young adults to move forward and get that education. It's apples and oranges talking about sitting out a year versus going ahead and letting them go into school. I think this is great policy. This is not anything new. This is not a new concept. This is something that's been asked about, and just these rules have not been adjusted. So that's why I brought this legislation. I brought it from a constituent from Jefferson County whose daughter was unable to take advantage of this process, and it just didn't happen. The rules didn't change. So unfortunately, I brought legislation to ask that the Department of Education change these rules to allow these kids to go ahead and get their education. Let's don't make them wait. Let's don't put burdens on the parents. And we've got the lottery out there. We've got lottery monies. That's why we set it up, to let these kids take advantage of that money, get that education, graduate.
Representative Cochran, you're recognized.
Hey, Chairman Farmer, I just had one quick question. Did you have, Mr. Henneman had mentioned two different groups of students, those who are kind of on that that higher academic path and just end up getting finished early. And then this would also potentially affect folks who get a GED or a high set. With the legislation, did you have one group of student or the other in mind? Like, did you have a particular situation in mind that was it more geared toward the GED high set folks or those who just get finished early because they, again, kind of were accelerated academically?
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it was geared towards those more aggressive students. I wasn't, and look, I'm kind of a fish out of water here in education. I usually stick to the speakers, put me in the civil justice and the criminal justice realm, and that's where I stay. But, I don't think it's bad policy either to offer those children or those kids, if they want to decide to go to college, and, even the set number two. I don't know who would or whatever. Some college isn't for everybody, and some folks go out and they have great careers without college. Be very successful. So, but my intent originally was towards that first set of just kids that's really focused, wants to get out of high school, enter into college early.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. Chairman White?
Thank you, and I think I got my head around it now. For a young person that's sharp enough to graduate early, let's don't put a roadblock in the way of them being able to take advantage. Okay, thank you, I get it.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none. Members, looks like we're ready to vote on House Bill 2436. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. You will head out to full
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
education. Yes, sir. Thank you. Next up on our calendar, item number 9, House Bill 2226 by Chairman Powers. Sir, you're recognized. Do we have amendments with this bill today?
No, there's not.
Okay. No. Can I get a motion in a second? Second. All right. Sir, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I lost my cheering section over here, but anyway, I'd like to present the bill. This is the middle college program, and I know you're all very familiar with it. It's operated as a 2-year post-secondary institution in partnership with the LEA. It permits the students in the fall of their junior year of high school to enter into a 2-year program at the same time and earn a high school diploma and an associate degree at the very same time. A lot of these students, we've been to the graduation. They actually graduate from that 2-year university before they graduate from high school. It's been a great program. I think about Chairman Vaughn, I'll refer to you, I think it was 7 years ago, I believe was when we first started the middle college program. But 95% of the students who complete the program also go on and complete a 4-year degree. And that's a great number. This bill, all it does is simply raise the middle college scholarship from $1,250 a semester to $1,625. Right now it costs about $2,000 per semester, plus the books and fees that they go along with it. So they still have a lot of skin in the game. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I renew my motion.
Thank you for that presentation. Members, do we have any questions? Chairman White, you're recognized.
Chairman, thank you for letting me ask so many questions. Representative Powers, would you, for the committee, some people have asked me, would you define middle college?
Sure. Middle college is simply a program where students, like in their junior year, they actually go to attend the local community college that we've set up, a state institution. And what they do, they take advanced courses, AP courses during that 2-year program. And those courses count toward their high school and toward their college degree. So those courses, when they finish that, they actually have that 2-year degree, plus they have that high school diploma at the same time.
Recognized.
Thank you. And do you know the answer to this question? We were talking about this, and it may be apples and oranges. The CTE money, we're talking about the TISA bill now, there's that $5,000 per student for CTE.
Yeah.
Does it have anything to do with the middle college? You know, of course, I know in the BPE they already get the money in BEP. So I just wonder how this and the CTE money that the students or the schools will be getting.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's an answer to that.
Yeah, I don't think so. Not as far as I know, it doesn't affect the CTE money at all, as far as I know.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just want to thank you for bringing this bill. I have a daughter that's in middle college, at Middle College High School in Memphis, who actually is, got her driver's license now. She drove me from Memphis to Nashville to get here, and I'm really thankful for that. Right, I've been waiting on this for a long time, right, to have a driver. But this is a great piece of legislation, and I really appreciate you bringing it. It's going to make a difference in a lot of people's lives. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for that. Members, any other questions? Seeing none, we are ready to vote on House Bill 2226. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? And the ayes have it. Chairman, you're ready for higher education or education full.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you,
sir. Item number 10 is off notice. That brings us to item number 11, and I believe we just saw the member come back in, Representative Gillespie. You have House Bill 2606. Can I get a motion? Motion. We have a motion and a second. It looks like you have at least one amendment to add to this bill. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. And it makes the bill.
And that amendment number? Is it 14524?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Sorry.
Can I get a motion and a second on the amendment? And we have that. Let's go ahead and add the amendment to the bill. All those in favor of adding the amendment number 14524 indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? And the ayes have it. The amendment's on the bill. Representative Gillespie, you are recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. What this legislation does is it further refines how Tennessee regulates the proprietary or for-profit higher education sector by streamlining the state's authorization process, reducing the regulatory burden on schools and aligning the law with the best practices of the field while maintaining important consumer protections and institutional accountability. This was brought to me by THEC, and if you'll have any questions, I welcome them, or we can go out of session and hear from one of the experts.
All right. This bill was brought to you by whom? By THEC, okay. Members, do we have any questions on the amended version? Seeing none, I believe we'll let Mr. Hinman off the hook today. All those in favor of passing House Bill 2606 onto the full committee indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? And the ayes have it. Congratulations, you're moving on. Item number 12 has been taken off notice. Item number 13 by Chairman White. House Bill 2094. Can I get a motion and a second? Motion. All right. Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Lafferty. And this also, I understand, is a cleanup bill brought to us by THEC. And since I seem to have more questions and answers today, I would like to ask that we go out of session and let THEC explain to us exactly what we're doing.
Without objection, we're out of session. Welcome back, sir, and if you would please go ahead and give us your name and who you're with for the record.
Thank you. This is a longer bill, so I'll sit.
Okay.
Thank you. Lou Hanneman with the Tennessee Higher Education Commission, and I appreciate Chairman White carrying this for us. If you'll recall, a couple of years ago, we, with the assistance of the General Assembly, moved the Financial Aid Simplification for Tennesseans Act, which was, for the first time in more than 40 years, a complete overhaul of the financial aid portions of the code. And, you know, basically a series of purely technical changes to align language that had gone into the code over those decades from multiple sources, and just to kind of get some consistency in language. As is the case with many things, when you flick a domino in the code, you set off all sorts of chain reactions. And so what we have brought to you this year is basically a cleanup from that cleanup. All of the pieces where we found things we had left out or adjustments that still needed to be made to the code. With one possible exception, there is nothing in this legislation that would add an opportunity for students that they don't otherwise have, nor does it take any programs offline. These are all strictly language adjustments in the code. The one exception I mentioned is we do have a provision historically that allows students who are residents of Tennessee who attend high school across a state border to remain eligible for state aid. We treat those high schools as eligible institutions for Tennesseans who graduate and then are eligible for financial aid. We weren't accounting for them properly. That fiscal impact is about $5,000 in the legislation. That's the only addition in cost that we're accounting for in here. I'm happy to go section by section, but again, most of this is purely cleanup around some of the outdated licensure language that we used to do in the state, but also some of the outdated loan language and our obligations under that. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that explanation. Do I have any questions for the members? From the members? Okay. Let's, instead of going through every single one, since we do spend a lot of time talking about HOPE scholarships and everything else, could you hit the ones that specifically clean up the HOPE language so that as a body we maybe are a little bit better versed going forward?
Absolutely. So nothing in here actually addresses either the HOPE awards or criteria or eligibility for those awards. And that goes across all of the lottery programs. What is addressed in here is as we implement new programmatic expansions over the years. If you go back to 2008, where we made several substantive changes, 2010, 2016, and so forth, with big changes to either the lottery programs or other financial aid, we always put in, for students who have graduated prior to this date, you know, they are grandfathered into these new programs. Well, we are now at a point in the lottery code where we're past the dates of all of those kind of caveats and grandfathering. So we've gone through the entirety of Title 49 and basically removed those grandfathering clauses because none of those students need to be accounted for. The same thing is true for when we onboarded Tennessee Reconnect. We had some language in there to address the distinctions between non-traditional students receiving the HOPE Scholarship and Tennessee Reconnect, which is its own award. And so some of that language is now obsolete. Most of what we've done around the Hope Awards is to remove obsolete or no longer relevant language.
Easy enough. I don't know if that was educational. We might be better off not knowing that. I don't know. Any further questions for our guest? Seeing none. All right, we'll go ahead and go back into session. Thank you for that. Okay. Let me get, we do have an amendment with the bill. I need a motion and a second.
Motion?
And a second. All right, motion and a second. We are going to vote on amendment number 14298. All those in favor of putting the amendment on the bill indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. Amendment is on the bill. All right, back to you, Representative Gillespie. I'm sorry, White, Chairman White.
Thank you, Chairman. And members, based on everything Mr. Hanneman just said, I renew my motion.
Well played, sir. Any further questions? Seeing none. All those in favor of passing House Bill 2094 on to full indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? And the ayes have it. All right. House Bill 2094 is on the way to education full. We are now on item number 14, House Bill 324 by Representative Vaughn. Can I get a motion? Motion and a second. Representative Baum, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Lafferty. This is a bill that I believe every member in here has heard before. It would align Tennessee's GPA or grade point system to that of other states, but it would have an impact on lottery dollars. Are we wanting to consider lottery bills all together, and maybe you want me to roll this to the heel?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of that question.
This is a bill that would impact our lottery dollars. And so I guess I'm asking if you would rather me roll this to the heel so that it would be considered with those bills.
Okay. For all practical purposes, we are there. Let's go ahead and proceed through this one.
Okay. This is a bill that would change our grading scales to a 10-point scale. They're currently on a 7-point scale. This is so that Tennesseans aren't at a disadvantage relative to students in other states. For example, a 92 in another state might be an A. A 92 in Tennessee is a B. This could impact Tennesseans when they apply competitively to other universities like Duke or Harvard, and students from other states have the same numerical grade but a higher letter grade. It could also affect Tennesseans when they apply for scholarships like nonprofit scholarships. Different corporations have scholarships. Coca-Cola has scholarships. Tennesseans are competing against students with other states. They may have the same numerical grade, but Tennesseans may have a different letter grade. This is a bill that would change the bands for our letter grades in Tennessee to be the same as those of every state that borders Tennessee and most states in the country. However, it would have an impact on our lottery expenditures because when you change those bands, there are some letter grades that move up. Sticking with my example, if somebody had a 92 that's currently a B, that would become an A. And when GPAs go up, that means more students are eligible for Hope Scholarship lottery dollars. That's not the intent of my bill. It's sort of an inadvertent byproduct, but since it would have that effect on Hope Scholarship expenditures, I just raised that as an issue.
Thank you for that. Members, any questions? Chairman Cochran, or Representative Cochran.
Thank you. So, yeah, I know we're kind of to that spot where we're facing really looking at all the bills that affect that Hope Scholarship money. This is an interesting one in that it does put Tennessee on the same playing field as as most states. And if you don't mind, if I could ask you a quick question and then come back with a follow-up. Chairman or Representative Baum, did you say how many states use this grading scale?
I have not surveyed all 50 states to know if there are some that don't use the 10-point grading scale. I have been informed by a research analyst that every state that touches Tennessee, which is 8 states, uses the 10-point scale. I've heard that all of them in the Southeast do. Probably virtually every state in the country does, but I'm not saying you can't find an example of a state that doesn't use a different grading scale, but most of them use the 10-point scale, most all of them.
And so where we are, I think, and obviously others can chime in and tell me what they think also, but I feel like just as a committee, as we've chatted through this process, I mean, I think we want to know how those big Hope Scholarship bills play out, like how the one obviously with the increase of Hope funding to the 5,100, and then also we had one go through full that would affect that same pot of money through the gambling sports betting bill that funds pre-K. So two big bills that deal with two big pots of money. But I just wonder, would now not be the time, if we're redoing the Hope Scholarship and how much folks get, would now not be the time maybe to put everyone on that level playing field as far as grading criteria goes? And I hate to just throw that out there in open discussion, but I mean, if yours is not addressed now, when we're redoing the funding for this scholarship anyway, when would it be addressed? And
Are you concluded? Let me try something here. If I'm hearing, I heard scholarship get integrated with these letter grades. It seems to me these these numerical grades, the assignments, end up affecting scholarships, not being scholarships. TISA being a separate animal, but the animal that we are addressing now for the overall way we fund education in the K through 12 for the state of Tennessee. It sounded like that got a little conflated.
Yeah, sorry, and I probably said it confusingly. So, so the two big bills being the Hope Scholarship increase to $5,100, that affects lottery dollars, and then also the way that the bill went through full committee the other day that funds pre-K, that also comes out of that same pot of money because it comes out of sports betting. And so we're kind of talking we're talking about that same pot of money, two big bills. And so I know we kind of want to wait and see maybe how those shake out. My only concern is if Representative Baum's bill is killed today, when would be that good time to bring that up? I guess, and like I say, if we're gonna put Tennessee students on that same playing field as every state that surrounds us, I don't know. I just wonder would this year be the best year to do it since we're looking at the best funding mechanism for the Hope Scholarship this year anyway. And I hate to just kind of throw that out there, but the fact that we are the only state in the Southeast, I'm just curious, what are your thoughts?
Representative?
I'm happy to respond to several things. I think Representative Cochran is right. There's two bills that affect the Hope Lottery Scholarship. One is the bill by Representative Alexander that we heard last week. The other one is the governor's bill that would raise the amounts of the Hope Scholarships to $5,100, just as an example, at a four-year institution. I don't think any of this affects the TISA formula that's being talked about at the K through 12 level. So that doesn't need to be part of the example or part of the discussion. And I'm happy to advocate for this bill right now. I've mentioned how we want Tennesseans to be on a level playing field with our neighbors. We also have issues with students who transfer into Tennessee in the middle of their high school careers, and they may transfer in from Missouri with a 92. It's an A in Missouri. They transfer to Tennessee. Maybe a military parent has moved to Tennessee, and then on the Tennessee transcript, that 92 suddenly becomes a B. We have examples where students have actually gone back to their originating state because when the student came to Tennessee, their GPA dropped. So I think there's lots of good reasons to consider this bill. It would have an impact on our Hope Scholarship lottery dollars, and so that's why I'm wanting in full disclosure to say that. That's inadvertent. I don't intend to spend, my intent is not to spend more Hope Scholarship lottery dollars. That's just sort of an inadvertent byproduct.
Thank you for that. Chairman White?
Thank you. And I think what I hear Representative Cochran saying is that we got a lot of money on the table already, right? And your concern is that we move things such as this particular bill out. We don't know what we're doing. You know, it could go to finance, but then we'll put the burden on finance. But we do have a responsibility in this committee also. Is that a good synopsis?
I believe that, yes, I believe that's accurate. And that would be kind of my feeling. I'm going to try to state this as clearly as I can, but that would be my feeling really on the remaining lottery calendar. I think that we would want to see how those big bills shake out. The only thing that I think the interesting caveat, I guess, with being Representative Baum's bill, in that if there were ever a year to get everyone on that level playing field, now might be the time, since we are redoing the funding, how much funding we are giving to Hope Scholarship. I'm just curious, that might be a good one to be in the overall funding discussion, to move that one forward. Again, the rest of them, I believe Representative Baum's bill is very unique in that it affects high school GPAs, and again, it just sort of inadvertently affected Hope Scholarship funding. I just wonder if we should make sure that at least is in the discussion in finance. Again, to take advantage of that, maybe that 1 year where we kind of put everybody on the same playing field GPA-wise. On the rest of the lottery scholarship, I agree with you. I think we should probably take a pause on that and see how those big bills shake out, because those specifically are asking for lottery dollars. Representative Baum's is not necessarily asking for those lottery dollars. It just had an inadvertent effect there. And so that's kind of where I would be. Again, if yours is going to be discussed, it seems like now might be the time to discuss it.
Any further comments? No? Any further questions? Thank you for opening that can of worms. Sorry. No worries. Representative Gillespie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to have to blame the previous speaker on this question now. I'm just curious to the sponsor. Let's say someone is in year 2 in undergraduate, and they right now do not qualify for any of these funds, and this bumps their grade up. Would they retroactively be able to, while they're still in school, apply for those dollars?
My understanding is if you're referring to year 2 of college, someone's already in college, I don't think it would change their high school transcript, and it wouldn't change the amount of Hope Scholarship funding that they're eligible for. Now, if someone's in year 2 of high school, then their transcript isn't finalized, and they'll have a GPA at graduation, and it would affect them. And again, the advantage of that would be so that if a Tennessean with an overall numerical grade of a 92 is competing with someone from Georgia to get into Duke, the student from Georgia with the 92 has an A, and the student from Tennessee with the 92 has a B. Same competition for scholarship dollars. This could actually be costing Tennesseans a lot of money in scholarships outside of the Hope Scholarship. Private scholarships could cost them admissions to some of these universities. I guess that's a long answer to your question, but if somebody's in college right now, I don't think it goes back and changes their transcript.
Any follow-up? No? Okay. Any further questions on this bill? Seeing none, members, we are going to be voting on House Bill 0324. All those in favor of passing House Bill 0324 indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Got one opposition. No, and the ayes have it. We're going to pass this out to Education Full. Congratulations. Folks, we are out of time here today. Item number 1, my bill. It opened up a little bit more than I thought it would. It's cost a little bit more than I thought I would, in deference to the bigger calendar of the lottery calendar. I'm going to go ahead and take that bill off notice. With that, do I have a motion to adjourn? We are adjourned. To the call of the chair.